You're listening to What is Black podcast, where we have conversations about issues important to raising healthy and thriving Black children and adolescents. I'm your host, Dr. Jacqueline Duget, a board-certified pediatrician and mom. So let's get started. Today's episode focuses on water safety, especially unintentional drownings. It's summertime, and kids and families will be enjoying outdoor activities like swimming or boating. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, drowning is a leading cause of unintentional injury and death in the United States. Children ages 1 through 4 have the highest drowning rates, and there's a disparity in the rate of drowning, with African American children having higher rates compared to white children. As a pediatrician and public health doctor, I want kids to have fun and be safe and want to prevent drowning. We're joined today by Dr. Steen, a pediatrician who's passionate about talking with her families about water safety. So let's get started with the conversation. Welcome, Dr. James. How are you doing this evening?
Very well. How are you?
I'm doing very well. So as my audience is already aware of, I try to get the best guests possible to help parents talk about important issues with their kids and just important information for families as well. And when I read your article from the American Academy of Pediatrics, as I'm alluding to now, Dr. James is a pediatrician, and I'll give an opportunity to share more of herself. But that's how I got to meet Dr. James. Started a conversation and just had an interest in the topic of water safety since it's summertime. So, Dr. James, if you could just share a little bit of information about yourself for our guests before we get into our discussion this evening.
So I am a solo pediatrician in Peachtree City, Georgia. I am a mother of 2 adult sons. And from a swimming standpoint, I never had formal lessons myself until I was a freshman in college. However, I learned to swim probably in a latter part of elementary school. And I learned how to dive, and basically an athletic director at the high school taught my friend swimming skills, who then showed me her skills. And we had just acquired a swimming pool in our neighborhood, and we were all excited about it. And so most of the kids, I would say, did not have formal swimming skills. Somehow, many of them learned to swim, but that was my start with swimming. I always wanted to be a swimmer. I grew up playing sports, and swimming was one of the sports I wanted to learn. And so finally, when the pool was put in our neighborhood, I learned to swim. And then the formal training, as I said, came when I was a freshman in college. I realized the value of that because from a social standpoint in college and even beyond, in Washington, D.C., we were often attending, we called them splash parties back then. A lot of my friends could not swim, those especially who did not go to the same college. But I thought it was very important. And even in life later on, there were opportunities to swim on vacations, snorkeling trips, all of those. I've even gone scuba diving before. So I have always valued the need for learning to swim. As a mother with boys growing up, I didn't initially prioritize as a number one until I've mentioned in the article about my first son falling in our family pool. So I reversed priorities for the types of sports they would learn, and actually started the swimming lessons then. Later on, as a mother, I realized with my sons becoming older and prioritizing other sports, they needed what I call tune-up lessons. So we put them again into formal swimming classes. I thought they were not water safe. I just kind of watching how their technique was. So swimming has always been something that I value. So in my practice, which is a patient-centered medical home practice, and I like the concept. We became certified, I think, back in 2015, and those concepts of patient-centered practice encourages you to focus on populations. And the thing I like about being solo, I have time to look at things of interest to my families, to certain population groups, and we're able to I call them many little projects in the office to see how can we make things better for our families, whether it be safety or related to some disease process. So we took up the swimming surveys even before the patient-centered medical home process started. I still am very much involved in sports activities, and the conversation, I can say it would happen naturally, but when families come into my practice, particularly with newborns, safety is something we talk about early on. The first visit, actually, we talk about the back to sleep, and we talk about other things for the development of infants through all the developmental stages. Safety becomes a part of that, and it has to do with the developmental stage and other conditions of children as they grow. And somehow with summertime and children telling me about their activities, I just started asking about the swimming. And even with very informal conversations, I realized there were discrepancies amongst certain populations. So I talked to my staff and decided we would survey our patients. I wanted to see how my patients looked in terms of this particular area of interest, which was swimming, and it was very telling. And so we continue to do that now. We started receiving responses from our parents. And I'll tell you, with safety, when parents come into my practice with newborns, I always talk to them about whether or not they know CPR. I think that's very important also. With children, knowing how to manage choking and any of those events that may occur prior to a formal emergency event. And then the swimming just became a natural part of it, talking to parents about, first off, household environments that with water that could be a problem with children. So it's kind of cutting it off. But anyway, this is how this all evolved. Just being in an environment in my practice where I could initiate those kinds of discussions.
So do you find that in your discussions with parents about water safety, that's inclusive of the importance of swimming as a way to address water safety?
It's certainly an opening to that. And it's very interesting because oftentimes I've found that water safety is not thought of. It started in the household and talking about it in the household and then moving it outside of the household because a lot of parents I learned either they know someone with a pool, they may have a pool, and it's really amazing. Some people have pools and they're not good swimmers, but there's increased access compared to when I grew up. But yes, talking about water safety at home really starts at, for instance, the bath and making sure a baby doesn't drown in their own little bathtub. And so it just really opens the thinking of parents when we start talking about it at home and just knowing that little baby who's now crawling and starting to pull up and being a problem solver, how they can potentially find some article, push it up to the toilet and fall head first. And so we talk about these things, and these are things oftentimes parents haven't even considered. If they're cleaning something and they leave water in a pail in the house, you know how an infant can pull up and fall head first into a pail full of water. So during the visits when they come in, especially with the well visits where we have time to talk about that, I just kind of, bring up ideas to them to consider in terms of safety in reference to water in their children.
And I think that's so important because I think it's easy to forget. The podcast, is really talking about the intent is to really talk about water safety with a specific focus on, swimming because of the summertime. But I think you bring up a very important point is that, from young to old, if you go swimming or not go swimming, like you said, just home environments can be a risk factor for kids, and just being aware of that. So I think that's great that you share that information. But I guess I just want to go back a little bit. When we talk about water safety, can you really talk about what is water safety? I know you've touched upon a few points, but I think I probably started the question off without maybe setting the stage about what is water safety.
So looking at the spectrum of children, and so swimming is further along, but water safety, so we're talking about environments where children are. We're talking about in the home as well as outside, visiting recreational places. So we're talking about not just learning to swim at the recommended time, but also engaging adults, family members, anybody who has to deal with care of the children, knowing what to do in terms of prevention of outcomes where children can drown. So it starts with caretakers, parents, grandparents, people in the household, siblings, in terms of what can happen in the house. And then, as I said before, making sure that you kind of baby-proof the house in terms of preventing accidents related to water. And then as the child progresses with their motor skills, becoming more adventurous as children do, and once they become ambulatory, evolving to the discussion of learning to swim and developing water skills. So it involves the skill set with the child, but it also involves parents, supervision, parents knowing CPR, and parents knowing how to swim also. Equipment is involved with this as well. So it's not just you're in the swimming pool and you're swimming, but if the child goes with the family, for instance, in a boat, having regulated life jackets. So water safety involves skill of the child. It involves equipment. It involves supervision, and it involves also skills of caretakers knowing how to prevent things and what to do if something happens. So it's pretty broad, actually. Water safety is, I think.
Mm-hmm. Which I think is a good perspective, because again, when people listen to the podcast, if they listen after the summer ends, the message of the importance of water safety, will continue. But I wanted to just circle back a little bit about, since we are in the summertime now, talking about how to prepare kids to learn to swim, because you talk about, your passion for it, and also you found that it was important for you as a parent to teach your kids to swim. But I think the one thing that was really jarring for me, or startling for me, in reading your article was the disparities that a lot of black and brown children are, I guess even historically, right, have lower rates of swimming.
Right.
And to me, that was startling, which could increase their, I don't know if that there's also an increased risk of drowning as well with that disparity in swimming, or if you've even found that with your patients.
Right. And I especially there, because of access, I think that has improved compared to years ago. I was surprised that was not more encouragement for children to learn to swim. And what I gleaned from the survey and talking to parents and looking at their reactions and their body language, most of the parents were not swimmers either, or they had had an event that scared them off, where they didn't want to try anymore, and focusing on other things that they thought, I guess, were more important. For instance, I mentioned I think that should be the first sport that children should learn, and some parents are eager for their child to grow up because they want them to be basketball players or football players. So some of them focus on other sports, and I think that in terms of the importance of learning to swim is not discussed. But I think a lot of it comes from fears of the parents. And when we did the survey, and I pushed it a little further than them giving a response, just asking why. And so oftentimes what I receive from parents is that they never learned to swim or they were afraid of the water. Sometimes they had never tried. They were just afraid of water. Some of the parents had participated in other sports growing up. They had never been introduced to it. That the conversation had not come up that, you should learn to swim also. So I think having conversations and knowing that there are opportunities and access facilities where kids can learn to swim, I think needs to be discussed and had not been. I don't think to the level, and maybe other doctors discuss it with their parents, but oftentimes when kids come to see doctors, it's about, what's making them ill or maybe getting well checkups. And I think taking it a little bit further and asking questions, I think is important. And I don't know if that happened with my parents. Many of them told me they had never discussed it. And I think I just prioritizing that as a skill set and as something very safety oriented. It had not been stressed to these parents before. So, but yes, back to the answer to the question, a lot of it had to do with parents never been encouraged to learn to swim. And I think, I hate to say it, but fears of the parents themselves. Some of the parents tell me they just have a fear of deep water. Some of them would go to the beach, but they would not get into a swimming pool and, sit on the beach, enjoy the sun. But some of them just had fears of water. And I think a lot of it had to do with not being encouraged to get into a formal swimming class and learn to swim. So on social, it's a trickle-down effect. So the parents never learned to swim, and so that was not a priority for them, for their children to learn to swim. And so discussions of environmental water safety had not been considered either. And I'm talking about possibility of water accidents within the house.
Which I think it's definitely an important discussion. Because I remember, my kid, when they were younger, I don't know why I took them swimming, did the swimming lesson. So we went to our local Y, and I vividly remember, I think it must have been the oldest one, putting him in the pool and his initial hesitation, but he loved it. And I found, I think one of the benefits of swimming with him was bonding, right? So my husband was on the side, I was in the pool, we took turns, he was in the pool, I was on the side. But it was really fun to kind of, hang out with your kid in the water. So
that's one of the things I stress to my families. It really is a nice family affair when you do that with your children. And so I think that, some of my families had not considered that. I said, just imagine you and dad are in the pool swimming with your children. I mean, that's really neat. And kids grow up and they remember those kinds of events. And that's kind of a bonding activity. And kids look forward to that. I know for my sons, we did a lot of those activities together, especially other sports events. Mm-hmm. And so it's a family affair. And so it's something that parents had not considered. And I told them, you need to consider that. And, if you'll go on vacation, just imagine how fun that would be. You're all in the pool doing that as a family. And so, right, I think it encourages family bonding when you do activities. Kids see it as play. And mm-hmm. It's a very nurturing thing to do with your children, I think.
Yeah, parents get to play too. You get to play, you get to have fun with
right.
kids at the same time.
Yeah, the other advantage of that, I tell them, it's good exercise for everybody. You burn calories, you use up a lot of energy when you're swimming, and so kids tend to like to stay in pools if you let them for hours sometimes, but it's good exercise also for children and parents.
It's interesting. I think it was like a few weeks ago, I saw on Twitter, this dad had taken a video of, someone had taken a picture of this, recorded a video of the dad and the son, and so, and then it was like a year or a couple years later, right? There was some sort of like time elapse, and it was about swimming. So he put his his son was going to dive off the diving board, but was very, very scared and nervous and decided not to. And then a few years later, you see the progression, and that little kid was like, he jumped off the board and was excited. And to me that kind of helped me also put into perspective, again, like you said, that family bonding, but also even the lessons beyond just learning to swim, the lessons you can even impart on your children, like for taking a chance and, daring to do something that they didn't think they could do.
I think also, when my patients learn to swim, it really encourages the parents who are non-swimmers. Mm-hmm. And I think I mentioned in my article about a child who I encouraged to go to this particular facility to learn to swim. And so a few months later, he came in and took his mom's cell phone and showed me the video of him diving into the pool. And he was in the deep water and swimming. And so the mother could not swim, and she told me she was going to sign up for swimming classes. And I told her I was so proud of her because the little 6-year-old would turn out to be a very good swimmer. And I encouraged her to learn. I said, just think of the fun the both of you will have now. He's a good swimmer, and he sees his mommy swimming. That's very great, So she was encouraged after her son learned to swim.
Which is awesome. So I had a quick question. In terms of when you talk with your patients about the importance of swimming, how young can a child be before they actually start swimming lessons?
The Academy of Pediatrics, I think, has a recommendation of maybe 3 to 4. However, some of the families I've learned, families that I have in my practice who have pools have children who learn earlier. So, and I don't know, years ago that I remember seeing a film clip of, they called them water babies, aqua babies, that these were infants that learned to swim. They could hold their breaths and not have the skill set of older kids, but they had to start the basic learning skills. I actually have had conversation with a facility near my office, and they will actually begin children at 9 months of age with a parent. They have an infant parent class, and the infant may not become proficient, but at least introductory skills that are, I think, age appropriate are introduced. So and what I've learned also, some of my families that have swimming pools, those children learn early. So typically they come in, and some of them 2.5 and 3 are very skilled swimmers at that time. There's concern about, will they drink the water? Will it make them sick and all of that? And like I said, I think you have to consider the developmental and the stage of the child. Even with the recommendations, I think it's 3 to 4. It's what I heard at our last conference. But children can learn younger than that. So I think the conversation needs to be with, the comfort of the family members. And even with parents who don't swim, I really encourage them to make sure that child is water safe or has some swimming skills. At least by kindergarten, 4 years of age or 5, but I really start encouraging them once the child starts walking, they can find a class to at least start the process. And many children, and we called it forward crawl when I was growing up, they know how to do that. They can hold their breath. Some of them can swim underwater. They can dive and do the basic, I think freestyle, and that's what they call it, freestyle swim, even at 3 years of age. So I think, conversations with the pediatrician, knowing what the child's development is at that time, the comfort of the families, and then considering, because some children have developmental problems, and so they may or may not start at 3 or 4 years of age, but, we say a lot, case by case, but certainly around 3 or 4, if not a little bit younger, I think lessons can start. And as I said, some children start during infancy, just before they turn a year of age, with supervision, of course, and maybe with the parent-child class. So there's a good article about that the American Academy put out in May, and they have their own recommendations as well. But once again, some parents will start lessons with their children much earlier. And I found with some of the populations that I surveyed, some children start lessons uh, earlier. And they come in and tell them at 3 years of age the child can swim already, and it's just really amazing.
Yeah, I think it's amazing to see, see little kids just have so much fun and their athletic ability and just, all the stuff that they're doing. I even know with my kids, if you put them in water, they're like, forget about it, right? Mom and dad aren't around, but they're also older too. But again, like you said, I think starting from young, when they were younger, I think sort of helped put that love of swimming and, lessen the fear of water. But I remember when they were definitely babies, I think my youngest one, you put him in water and he was like, didn't like the water. It may have just been the temperature of the water, but over time it was nice to see the progression. So I just want to circle back. I know we've been talking a lot. We mentioned a lot about families with younger children because I think that's so important, like you said, to kind of start them off early to build that foundation and hopefully that love of that activity. But how is it also important for us to talk to older children and teens about water safety, swim safety?
It is, and let me tell you this, and this is from a personal, I mentioned this, and I'll use my sons as examples with this. So they had swimming lessons with the group, they were in camps, and I think at least 2 summers they had swimming lessons. They started other sports, so by the time they were middle school, they were doing multiple sports, and then they started focusing. Both of them started focusing on tennis. Well, we took a family vacation to Florida, and we were all in the pool having fun. And I watched them doggy paddling. I said, let me see you freestyle. You've had lessons. And they went back to doggy paddling. I said, okay, so let me see you tread water here. And it was very brief, and then they started doggy paddling. So I said, you know what? And that's when I first used the term, you're not water safe. And I realized that because they were focused so much on the other sports, they needed a tune-up. They needed a repeat lesson class in swimming. So they complained about being in swimming classes with smaller children, and they said the 3-year-olds. So I said, okay, we'll have individual private lessons. So what we did was schedule both of them for individual private lessons, and they were half hour each, 4 lessons. And then they became water safe. They could freestyle. They could tread water. So because they had put the swimming on the back burner for a while and adapted not good swimming techniques, we had to have repeat classes with them. We talked about safe swimming because of sports, and when children are around other children with sports activities, we found that for cool down, everybody would jump in the pool. So we had to talk to them about making sure there was an adult. Even though they learned to swim, there was an adult always present because they travel for their tournaments with other children and coaches. And also, when they became high school age, we talked about swimming. I mentioned in the article about a drowning my husband experienced in high school. Parties, sometimes there may or may not be alcohol involved, but that safety continues through adolescence. So I tell my teens who can swim that there should always be an adult. They should never go swimming in strange waters. Because even good swimmers, if there's something underneath that could harm them, if they dive in, that could be a problem. So there's some things in terms of preventing drowning in adolescents, even if they can swim, that needs to be discussed. And I've had adolescents who learned to swim when they were young and they stopped also. And so we talk about doing refresher swimming classes so that they make sure they have good swimming skills. but also recognizing also with teenagers swimming when there's no supervision of parents, potentially under the influence of alcohol. Discussions need to center around that as well. And from a positive standpoint, the other thing, too, I mentioned I've done sports all my life pretty much, and so I always encourage the teenagers to use that, I call it a cross-trainer activity, typically by high school time, if not before, and sometimes in latter elementary. If children are doing sports, they tend to start focusing on maybe one or two. And so I tell them to incorporate that with their training activity, because I tell them, I said, well, it's going to make you use muscle groups you may not use when you're playing basketball or, soccer or playing tennis. And so it's always a good cross-trainer activity as well. But definitely, especially close to graduation times and even birthday parties. A lot of teams have we call them splash parties in the past, but pool parties for birthday celebrations, having discussions about safety for teens, injuries. Sometimes teenagers do things, I don't want to call it daredevil behavior, but things that could put them at risk for head injuries around pools, inappropriate immersion into the water. So anyway, you need to have discussion about, I think there should be discussion about safety with the teens, especially with social events and celebrations, graduations, and all of those kinds of activities.
Oh, that is great advice. And just so I don't forget, is prevention of drowning only a concern during the summer?
No, it's not. There are always opportunities for drownings, and swimming occurs year-round, actually. It's not just a summertime event. We hear more of accidents during the summer, and some kids wait till they get out for summer vacation, and everybody hits the pool, they go to the beach. But vacations occur year-round, and access to pools year-round. Now, a lot of pools will close down, but particularly for vacations and just pools that are inside, I think there's always a possibility that some accident could occur. So it's not just a summertime event. There's more reports of events around the summer, but any place where there's water access could be a potential hazard. So it's not just relegated to summer that we need to be water safe, actually.
Thank you so much, Dr. James. Before we end our conversation, is there any other information that you'd like to share with our listeners?
The Academy of Pediatrics, I think, has parent information, and I'm sure, I haven't looked at it, but I'm sure there's probably some updated information regarding swimming. As I said, in May, the article came out from the Academy regarding prevention of drowning, but there's also a parent access to the Academy of Pediatrics, where parents are interested, they can access information about drowning prevention, swimming lessons, and all those issues that would be of interest to parents. So I would encourage parents to look at the sites on the Academy of Pediatric website regarding swimming. Also to talk to their doctors about it. We've tried to make a national push on this in terms of information, and I personally incorporated with my discussion during physical exams. We call it anticipatory guidance. So water safety in the house and swimming is a part, and also learning CPR for parents. I've started incorporating that into my wellness visit discussions with the parents. But they can access the website. I'm sure the Academy has information about swimming for parents.
So I will make sure to put a link in the show notes to the American Academy of Pediatrics prevention information. And again, thank you so much, Dr. James, for joining us today.
Okay, thank you for having me.
I hope you learned something new from this episode and will share the knowledge that you gained with a fellow parent, because we all want to have a happy and healthy and fun and safe summer. So until next time, thanks for listening to this episode of What is Black Podcast.